In 1894, deep in the southern Mexican mountain ranges of Sierra de Oaxaca, in a small village called Huejuta de Jimenez, a baby girl was born that would change the world of science. Maria Sabina Magnalia Garcia will grow up on a settlement so old that its land and its people were known as Mixtecan for its direct lineage to the Mazatec era. Young Maria's toddler years put her in very close contact with several shamans from her father's side of the family, and gave the young impressionable mind of Maria great intuitive knowledge of the rituals and healing powers of her culture. It's written that sometime in 1902, at age 8, Maria would consume the divine mushroom for the very first time. And it is here that I would like to remind everyone that when a woman from a very remote village becomes the host to people of such as John Lennon and Mick Jagger, there's going to be a lot of hearsay about her. But as the legend goes, later that year in 1902, Maria's uncle had fallen deathly ill. Other shamans in the area were called in and tried their cures upon him, but they only happened to make him feel worse. Maria, again at age 8, decided to ingest some of the divine mushroom, which then gave her the powers to see which correct herbs and spices that her uncle had needed. After venturing off deep into the forest and collecting the specific herbs that she's seen in her visions, she would cook them and later give them to her uncle. 3 days later, he would recover. Now, whether that story is true or not kind of doesn't matter, because whatever happened upon that day, it gave 8-year-old Maria such respect in her community that she was donned the new wise woman. For 50 years following the tale of this mystical 8-year-old curing sickness, Maria and her legend will grow. Although she was of Mazatec descent, Maria was a devout Christian, and it's written that her Virgils were so popular, not only for their effectiveness, but for their unique blend of Christian and Mazatec faith. All would be normal for the Coriander until June of 1955, when Alan Richardson and R Gordon Wasson would show up at the near 60-year-old Coriander's home. It is here that I would like to refer you to a video that we did on that topic. You can find that link up in the corner. But for the sake of this video, the important part is R. Gordon and Alan Richardson were the first white people to ever experience an indigenous Mazatec ritual with the psilocybin mushroom. So afterwards, R. Gordon assembled scientists and photographers and CIA grant money to explore the powers of this newfound mushroom. And even though in the initial Life magazine publication, R. Gordon referred to Maria Sabina as, quote, Eva Mendez to help hide the holy priestess's identity, the floodgates had been opened, and sadly, Maria's life would never recover. Although R. Gordon's expedition was a huge success for the world of science and conscious enlightenment, and honestly, us Americans, Maria, on the other hand, had just performed an indigenous mushroom ritual on someone who wasn't sick or suffering for the first time. She would later go on to write that on that very night in 1955, she could foresee the magic she possessed from the mushrooms slowly leaving her spirit. Unfortunately for the remote people of Oaxaca, the release of Life magazine's article coincided perfectly with the American counterculture movement of the 1960s. First, it would be the curious chemist or random photographer, then the odd group of intellectuals or anthropologists. But by 1966, just 10 years or so after Oaxaca had witnessed its first white travelers, the town now had to deal with herds of tourists and celebrities who traveled with their disrespectful American ways. From John Lennon, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, and even perhaps Walt Disney, the influx of attention and media personalities put great stress on this indigenous community. Maria herself would also feel great stress, but hers came in both physical and spiritual fashion. She would write, "These young blonde people don't respect our customs. The improper use that the young made of the mushrooms is scandalous. For the moment the foreigners arrived in search of God, the spirit of the children lost their purity. The foreigners have spoiled them, and now they aren't any good. And sadly, there's no remedy for that. By the late 60s, there was no denying the disastrous effect this new tourism had had upon the land. Poor locals from surrounding villages would start to cut off travelers with scams and schemes, most becoming mushroom hunters, depleting well-known areas of sacred growth. More and more white travelers would show up in the town, wounded or sick from their treacherous travels through the mountains, thus spreading uncommon and dangerous germs to the indigenous locals. It is at this point that the once high priestess, held upon a pedestal in her community, was now suffering the stigma of being called a sellout to her people and her culture. To the elders, Maria had turned the sacred practices of their culture into a mockery. And even worse, the influence of the white tourists were now turning the young children of the village into young hippies, or gringos. A wise man older than Maria would go on to say, "It is truly terrible that the sacred mushrooms no longer belong to us. The language has been spoiled and is now indecipherable to us. It is now that the mushrooms speak English, the foreigner language." The social tensions caused by Maria's traveling guests boiled over so much that her home would be burned down, and later, her son would be murdered. As the 1960s hippie era turned into the disco 70s, the general interest of the American public had turned into a more powdery drug from Mexico. Maria Sabina would live in shrouded guilt. The loss of Maria's child and home were only worsened when the authorities in nearby Oxycana City were pressured by U.S. Customs to begin intervening in the Corianders matters. Maria continued to give Virgils after relocating, even though she would write in poetry that every day she was mourning the loss of her indigenous Mazatec faith that became her life's work. In the 1980s, America began ramping up its war on drugs, which meant constant harassment for the 80-something-year-old woman. And in 1985, Maria Sabina Magnolia Garcia would pass into a different realm. Some say that she died living a very sustainable life given by voluntary donations. Some say that she would die penniless. Both conclude that Maria had died alone, undoubtedly mourning the loss of her son, her communal standing, and her ancient culture. It is here that I would like to end this dour video with a poem from Maria herself. Cure yourself with the light of the sun and the rays of the moon, with the sound of the river and the waterfall, with the swaying of the sea and the fluttering of the birds. Heal yourself with mint, with neem and eucalyptus. Sweeten yourself with lavender, rosemary, and chamomile. Hug yourself with cocoa bean and a touch of cinnamon, and put love in your tea instead of sugar, and take it while looking at the stars. Heal yourself with kisses that the wind gives you and the hugs of the rain. Get strong with bare feet on the ground and everything that was born from it. Get smarter every day by listening to your intuition, looking at the world through the eye of your forehead. Jump, dance, and sing so that you live happier, and heal yourself with beautiful love, while always remembering you are the medicine. Thanks for watching.